Welcome back to the Nobel Trading Show. Today is going to be a little bit of a different episode. It's going to be a very political episode, and I'm not taking any partisan side, and don't be too quick to click away because you might learn some things here. What I really want to focus on is the importance for traders and investors to not become trenched in their ideas and ideologies and then try to sculpt that out on the market. I always use the metaphor of us being surfers. We need to glide across the waves and through the changes that occur. It's also very important to pay attention to politics and what's going on politically because it has such an impact on the economy and the stock market and even different sectors as well, or even international trade. And all these factors play in, which means that, I can't help but comment on what's going on politically when there's such a ripple effect into the markets. This sometimes leads to a lot of polarization, especially in the people I interact with. They don't like something I said, and they think that I'm skewing to some sort of a subset of beliefs. Rather, I'm trying to keep that objectivity, and I think I do a fairly good job of it. I mostly avoid mob mentalities, and I don't use social media to reaffirm whatever beliefs I have. I'm very stoic with what I want to do, and I try to stay very objective with what I think is right. So in this video, I'm going to try to explain kind of the methodology and the different thought processes I go through when I think about different topics or perspectives in the market. I hope you enjoy, and cue the intro. Let me just start by saying that I don't really like getting political, nor do I think that I'm always correct. I just believe in the importance of everyone having a voice, and I believe in the importance of having those discussions and public discourse about social topics. One of the things that bothers me the most is this polarization has really led to groups of people being excluded from conversations, or even just the straight up suppression of certain opinions. I think that this is fundamentally flawed, and there's no historical precedence that would make me think anything otherwise. Not once has that type of mentality ever led to a better society. It never works, ever. And I also don't like this political polarization. I don't like people painting them as the enemy, or they are the enemy. It's arbitrary, it's not specific, it's not helpful. If you want to solve issues, we need to talk about specific issues and treat them all as individual issues. And I don't even think that any particular political party is worse than another. And I think this is really important to understand because it helps me not paint people as enemies or as evil. I look at politics as a spectrum. They are the phenotype for the genotype. The genotype is our personality differences. We all exist on a spectrum of personalities. I think that you're more creative and more open-minded, maybe more in touch with their emotions. Those tend to be your liberals. On the other side, the people who, and keep in mind, those liberals are usually really great at starting companies. These are your creatives. They're going to come up with fantastic ideas. Lots of them are going to suck, but a small portion of them are going to be amazing ideas. The issue that this personality set runs into, though, is they're horrible at running companies. Enter in the conservatives. These are going to be more of your type A. They're going to be a little bit more disagreeable. That is a personality set that makes them also really great at running businesses, companies. Makes them really hyper efficient when it comes to that. But when it comes to starting companies, they tend to be terrible. They tend to have awful aesthetics, and they tend to be a little insensitive to, social discourse or opposing opinions. These are just different personality subsets. And I don't see any type of personality or personality traits to be negative. A lot of people might say, well, if you're highly disagreeable, isn't that a negative? And I'd say no. I want the most highly disagreeable lawyer to be my lawyer. I want him to argue with everyone on every little point and I want them to win. So why would I then paint that as a negative? This person has a specific subset that they can excel at. And them excelling at that role that they fill in our society is better for all of us. And having people who can specialize in that sort of way and then excel at whatever it is they do is also good for all of us. And then when you create a government and you want to have a nice spectrum of ideas covered, it's good to have some sort of dichotomy. Sometimes that ripples out to multiple political parties rather than just two. But I think that's really important because when you're having this discourse and you're talking about these different issues, you want those varied opinions and you want to be able to have a full-fledged conversation through them and work it out. What I see is the constant painting of other people as being evil or awful. And a lot of this, instead of being about how competent someone is at solving problems or coming up with problems or how competent they are at communication, we're instead just coming down to slogans and feel goods. And these cause all sorts of problems. They trample all over nuance. And these issues are complex. To think that they can be solved simply with a slogan is just naive. And I'm not trying to take shots at anyone when I say that. And I'm not trying to be divisive when I say that. I'm just trying to reiterate that having that perspective, having those nuanced thoughts about things really prevents you from falling into this trap of I only read headlines, I want my team to win, and the other guys are just evil. That's a really dangerous mindset to have. It's not productive to a society where we want everyone to succeed and everyone to have a voice. And I feel like a lot of the people that even preach for everyone to have a voice turn around and tell others to shut up when they don't agree with them, or pick out only information that defends their side. We need objectivity more than anything. And right now, when we're looking at politics and where they're going and the way these conversations go, or even how Twitter acts, it's really troubling to me. And I think some of it also comes down to the fact that we don't kind of accept responsibility for some of these things. And this is going to be a little derailing, but when we talk about these social media companies, I feel like in 5 to 10 years, we'll consider a lot of the conversations that we have today to be a lot like the conversations that we used to have about video games causing violence. Understand that these algorithms and such, they show you things that you click on. They show you more of what you give your attention to. And what that tends to be for most people is negative things. And then they blame the algorithm rather than understanding how the algorithm functions to only show them what they have shown it that they want to see. There's no acceptance of any sort of blame. And I'm not going to write off these CEOs and say that they're perfect and that everything's our fault, but I do want to say that this is another example of a more nuanced situation where we aren't giving the due to ourselves, but rather wanting to point at someone and say they're evil and awful and causing all the problems, and we haven't done anything. When you think about all the stuff on social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, or YouTube, or even some of the more smaller companies like Rowdy or Getter, what I'm thinking when I look at those is what actually comes to the top is all that people comment on. When the people look at like Instagram and say all Instagram is just models and there's no nuanced conversations, I think to myself, well, there are, but what people select to rise to the top through their interactions with the social media is what we see. And so there's not even, I don't even regularly hear even people even acknowledge that. There's lots of content across these platforms that expands way outside what you see reach the upper 1%, which you have to remember, like it's only 1% of the content that really goes viral, right? Even on TikTok, which is made to go viral. So people take that 1%, those very reactionary posts that look for constant novelty and new, and they want, fast action, not long form conversation like this. When you see that big push for that, it then skews the conversation and fails to acknowledge the diversity that actually exists, which then makes it easier for us to say, well, these companies obviously are not for the betterment of humanity, rather than acknowledging that we kind of shape how these companies form with our own actions. And taking that perspective and branching it back to the political, we elect these constituents. We elect them into power. And so when we say that the government's ruining everything, you have to remember that we still live in a democracy where we elect our leaders. And a lot of these issues that people have actually start at a more local level where there's no participation, where no one's really voting for their local government. But people who reach those higher seats within governments usually start at a local level. Then they build a career in politics and they work their way up from there. When you're not paying attention to what's local around you or your community, you're playing a part in actually the larger society. A lot of people think that they don't have a say, like what they do doesn't matter. This also extends to the stock market, where people buy things like AMC and GME because they're not thinking about the fact that whoever they invest in can utilize that money to move their company forward. That money that you invest could be used towards a company that you think is actually making a better, brighter future. It's almost like we forget that the power we have. We forget our potential. We forget what we are able to do and the impact that we're able to have. And a lot of that, I think, might ripple down from this group thought of like, well, it's all about groups and the groups you're in and what your group can do. But groups subdivide into individuals, right? Because if you take all the groups that a person's in, what you end up getting at the end of the day is an individual who's unique among everyone else. When people try to come up with the differences in groups, they fail to recognize the fact that there's always more similarities between two groups than differences. It's easier to focus on the differences because it's a smaller list. But what actually is more dominant in almost all cases are the similarities that coexist. It's important to remember these things. Start local and understand that we're all more alike than we are different, and that our differences make us all unique groups of one. The more negative effects of this toxic mindset that I see people have are, of course, the fact that they just write off someone or they immediately try to box them in. That's probably the number one human symptom in general, actually, is just boxing people in. You take a quick knee-jerk reaction and you make a bunch of assumptions about this person. Evolutionarily, this is actually a huge advantage because it takes too long to get to know someone on a long time frame. So evolutionarily, your brain is programmed to take quick assessments of things. It doesn't always apply to people, though, but it could apply to situations or just vibes. That is programmed into our minds, in the back of our unconscious, as are a lot of other things, including this tribalism that also is rampant. Lots of people will say, well, that exists within such and such political party. It's not true, though. It extends well past that to sports teams, to even what social media is your favorite type of music. It ripples out everywhere. And these were advantages when we were, still using sticks and stones and every tribe around us wanted to go to war. It was advantageous for us to make those quick assertions and inferences and then act upon them, because it usually led to a longer longevity and survival of your tribe, which was, at that time extremely important. In today's society, we're fairly civil, and that might at times fluctuate, or we might have periods of volatility. But in general, globalization and the network of trading between countries has led to a lot of less wars and a lot less conflict. There's a lot more compromise, and in general, we've been more civil as a globe, not just in the U.S. It's important to remember that because we forget how volatile things can really be and how far the drop off can be from where we are. And when the world is more dangerous than it's ever been through the development of technology, it becomes more and more important that we don't fall back on these basal evolutionary traits that we all inherently have. And the fear here that I kind of see developing is we're seeing a decoupling of this globalization, as we also see a complete deterioration of our ability to enter in social discourse. And I know making this video will have no great, massive impact to society in general. And I think a lot of people will also just inherently disagree with me because I'm not on any side. I've taken no partisan perspective on anything I've discussed. And in fact, I know with the social media in particular can be really polarizing. People don't like the idea that there is a portion of responsibility that they should accept when it comes to politics or when it comes to social media. They feel helpless. But you're not helpless. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to empower you to understand that you are a powerful individual and that you can really have great impact. And that impact doesn't have to extend to the entire nation. If you can help one person become a better person, develop more nuanced ideas, and gain more perspective, that person will ripple out to people outside of your realm of influence, and you will make change that you can't see. Now you won't get that feedback. You won't go viral on TikTok, but you will have an impact that is meaningful. And that's the main goal of Nobel Trading. I have no anticipation to explode, but I can at least, to the people who are willing to listen, share some knowledge that I hope will be financially advantageous to them and also lead to them having more freedom in their thoughts and their finances for their future self. Because oftentimes what you see and what people fall into is this I must win mentality. And CEOs and lawyers really can stumble into this on probably the more extreme spectrum of outcomes when they become solely sought after profits or solely trying to just get a victory on, or, a tally for their wins on whatever case or situation is in front of them. It makes them also very malleable in their set of beliefs. You have to understand, in a famous quote by Dave Chappelle, that when you do things that are better or worse, you end up just in a maze. And you're easily manipulated within this maze. You're just hunting for the cheese. But if you're someone who follows a good or bad, you tend to escape this maze. You tend to run away from things that are bad and run towards things that are for a greater good. What a lot of these CEOs forget, what causes them most of the time to run into trouble, is when they completely break away from the sense of good and they get caught up in what's right in front of them. What's right in front of them is benefit our shareholders. Or what's right in front of that politician or lawyer is benefit my party. They forget about the greater role that they play in society. They forget that everything they do has such a massive impact. And part of that is right back to that thing of people who truly believe that they are helpless and can't have that massive impact without help from a group or without ludicrous amounts of money or without a massive sphere of influence. But that's just a fallacy. It's not true. And of course, the other negative side of that is it allows people to excuse the negative effects that they have. Something that we've seen Zuckerberg do at Facebook is, well, this company is greater than me. So, it's actually the fault of all of us. And so, I'm fine. I'm out. I'm scot-free. Same thing with Jack Dorsey, who ended up just completely leaving Twitter rather than trying to have a voice there. And, he's someone who's very pro free speech, but someone who let himself get run over by people who were chasing things that were better or worse. They're saying, well, it's worse for us to have this misinformation on the site, and it's better if we start limiting all that. Is that really after the greater good, though? It's not. It's just not. It's indefensible. And there's some things like that point I just made, that some people might say, oh, well, he's obviously a conservative. But I think some situations that we politicize are not political. They're inherently not political. Free speech is not political. We wrote it into a law because it needs to be written into a law for people to actually obey it and actually support it and not trample all over it. But the reality is it was listed as a God-given right, and it should be inherent. And I think we forget that too frequently. And that really brings us to a whole list of different conversations that are being held right now. I feel like what's occurring is everyone seems to be stuck in a maze between what's better or worse, especially with the policy making that's currently going on in the U.S. And I want to be specific on why I'm making this video. I feel like it is notably more volatile than it's ever been. Especially when you look at the deterioration of people who are kind of centered. Coming into November, it looks like we're going to have a massive red wave. A lot of this has nothing to do with anything that the Republicans have done, though. It's more people just trying to run away from the blue wave that we recently had. And within these political parties, though, we're also seeing them completely deteriorate. A lot. And I made this in the predictions video. I said nothing would get done by the government so far this year. Everything's been vetoed and torn apart, and we're seeing that continue to extend. And this really branched off from inaction on the bill that Biden put forward for the infrastructure. And so, as this continues to deteriorate, what are we seeing is that they're chasing policies that don't actually affect the greater society in a positive way, but different policies that tend to only help the political party. It's really disappointing to see that become the major focus, especially when there's so many things right now that really need to be addressed a lot more rapidly than they are. So the point of this is to really maybe try and bring some nuance into members of MBT, but also anyone who happens to stumble upon this video, and also set the guardrails for how I'm going to conduct myself when I continue to comment on things that are political, because there is such a ripple effect to the decision making of the government. And remember, in the past, when the government was small and had very little responsibilities, there was not much changes to the stock market or to the economy with the decisions that they made. And as they play a greater role into how we handle money, as they play a greater role into the free market, we see that deteriorate in some very positive ways when it comes to limiting the reach of monopolies or limiting the reach of big tech companies who are also playing a greater role in politics. I see that all as good. The bad things I see are when politics enters areas where it does not belong, like the medical field, like environmentalism. And I know that was very controversial with the environmentalism comment. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is a lot of policies that are negative to the environment. And, the elimination of fracking, the limitations on coal companies is detrimental to our infrastructure. And it has had a negative impact to the environment. This is a symptom of slogan following. This is not a symptom, of objectivity. Objectivity would actually carry us through this. And you see, free markets are objective in everything they do. They will try and help the environment since there's a huge social push for it. It doesn't need political intervening for that to occur. Same with the medical field. Politics entering the medical field only makes the medical field worse at its job, which is benefiting us and our health altogether. When you start to incorporate politics in that, you then make everything divisive. You then suppress different opinions. Science has done an excellent job of doing that itself, with rigorous debate, with constant, let's bring this up again, let's reevaluate this. Okay, let's have this discussion here and that discussion there. When politics enters things, it just makes everything worse, makes it also slower. And then you have to get all these barriers and through all these hoops, and then you have to convince people of this perspective or that perspective for this party's benefit. And then people then subdivide themselves and then just start preaching whatever slogan that their side is on. These issues are better left more nascent in the perspective of politics and more up to social discourse, because it just leads to more healthy conversations. And it avoids this headline punching, just constant headline punching that really doesn't dive deep into complexity of a lot of these issues. And, let me revisit that environmentalism claim I made. When I'm talking about us repealing back how much we use oil and coal, or even the ending of fracking, remember that we are an entire globe. We're not just the U.S. So when I'm saying like we supply the entire globe, when you decrease how much we supply to the global trade, you increase how much our foreign actors participate in the global trade. They do not have the same amount of green-minded practices in their industries. They create larger carbon footprints. So when we pull back, they make more. Their larger carbon footprint actually causes more pollution and more negative impacts to the globe. And when it's all political, it's all domestic. We don't think of ourselves as an international actor or even as someone who is a role model. And the U.S. is still a role model. I know there's a lot of negativity over the U.S., but we are still looked up to. I've been to China. I went to China. I spent a full month there. When I say that they idolize us, they definitely idolize us. My younger sisters, one of them is blonde and blue-eyed. That doesn't happen in Chinese genetics. Everyone's brown hair, brown eyes. Her being that far outside of the norm made her a celebrity the entire time we were there. We went to Beijing, Guangzhou, Xi'an. Everywhere we went, everyone wanted photos. Everyone wanted to know about America. Everyone loved America. We forget that. We think that everyone thinks that we're awful. Granted, we're the end of a lot of jokes, but that's very normal. That's very normal for whoever is at the top to receive lots of criticism, as they should, because they're at the top. Same with criticizing both political parties. We should criticize them. They're in charge. They have a monopoly in force. We should be constantly scrutinizing them and every little thing that they do, but on both sides, so that we can have a healthier conversation. And then we should really kind of pull back on what is actually political. Is it actually political to have marriage in that conversation of politics and deciding parties? Is it actually political to have something like abortion be decided by politicians who have a monopoly on force? Are these issues going to actually be resolved when they are left to politicians? That's the big question that I want to ask. I'm not saying what's right or wrong on a lot of these, but I'm saying that this is part of what's making us so divisive and so polarized, is that we're making everything political, things that don't really make sense to be political issues. So I just wanted to really just kind of cover that in a wide sweeping video in the hopes that maybe this has opened your mind a little bit to how you think about policies or how you think about the social discourse that's going on, and maybe helps you to not be so have such negative reactions to people who have different perspectives than you. Realize that they just fall differently on a personality scale than you do, and also have their own differing life experiences. And maybe better understanding their side will help you not only tell them your side, but also realize the similarities that you both have. We all want to live fruitful lives that serve the greater good. maybe not the greater good, maybe the maybe the amount of influence you have should increase with the more competency you have. So start with you, right? And then, okay, if you're good at taking care of you, maybe you can also try and take care of your family. If you're good at that, maybe you can try taking care of your community. If you're good at that, then maybe you start trying to take care of the nation and these problems on a national scale. If you're really good at that, then maybe you could start talking about what's going on internationally. Now, that last step, I think we're skipping. I think it's a problem. We need to focus on us. We have enough issues here in the U.S. And even though I think there are a lot of awful things happening internationally, I think that the commentary on what's going on globally needs to kind of die down a little bit. And we need to kind of, clean our own closet. And then we can start engaging with other political actors and what they should or should not be doing. Because all we do is just invite people to criticize us. And right now, we're not in too good of shape to really address that or even defend ourselves. So I hope this has really got your brain going, really got you thinking. Go ahead, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. And I will see you on the next video. We'll actually talk about the market, and I'll do a walkthrough of that because there's a lot going on. So I'll probably do a few videos that I'll rock out. I hope that you enjoyed this. And I'll see you on the next episode.